In the late 19th century, the Carpathian Mountains cast a long shadow over the village of Varnath, a place where superstition clung to every cobblestone. The villagers spoke in hushed tones of Castle Dracula, a decaying fortress perched on a jagged cliff, its towers piercing the storm clouds like claws. Legends told of a nobleman, Count Dracula, whose name was synonymous with death. Most dismissed the tales as myth, but the elders knew better. Evil never truly dies. Clara Ionescu, a skeptical journalist from Bucharest, arrived in Varnath in 1898, drawn by rumors of disappearances linked to the castle. Armed with a notebook and a revolver, she sought to debunk the folklore and expose the truth. The villagers, however, warned her to stay away, their eyes wide with fear. "The Count sees all," an old woman whispered, clutching a rosary. Clara scoffed, but as she gazed at the distant castle, a chill settled in her bones. That night, a letter arrived, sealed with a dragon crest. It invited her to catalog the castle's archives for a generous fee, signed by Count Dracula himself. Against her better judgment, curiosity won. As she boarded a midnight coach, the fog seemed to whisper her name, and the mountains watched, silent and unyielding. Clara could not know she was stepping into a nightmare from which there was no escape. The coach rattled through a forest of twisted pines, the horse's hooves pounding like a heartbeat. The driver, a cloaked figure with hollow eyes, spoke no words, urging the steeds faster as wolves howled in the distance. Clara gripped her satchel, the revolver's weight a small comfort. The castle loomed ahead, its silhouette a jagged wound against the moonlit sky. Gargoyles leered from the ramparts, their stone faces frozen in silent screams. The iron gates creaked open, admitting Clara into a courtyard choked with dead roses. Inside, the air was heavy with decay, the walls slick with damp. Count Dracula awaited, his presence both regal and predatory. Tall, with skin like alabaster and eyes that burned red, he welcomed her with a smile that didn't reach his gaze. His voice was velvet, yet it coiled around her like a noose. The library, he explained, held centuries of knowledge, and she was to organize it. As he led her through shadowed halls, Clara noticed the absence of mirrors and the unnatural silence. No servants, no birds, only the echo of her own footsteps. That night, in her chamber, Clara dreamt of blood and clawing hands. She awoke to scratching at her door, but the corridor was empty, save for a single rose petal, crimson and wet. The castle felt alive, its walls watching, waiting. Clara resolved to work quickly and leave, but something in Dracula's gaze told her escape would not be so simple. The library was a labyrinth of dust and shadow, its shelves groaning under ancient tomes. Clara worked by candlelight, transcribing texts in languages she barely understood. Dracula visited often, his questions probing, her family, her fears, her dreams. His presence was magnetic, yet each encounter left her drained, her neck prickling as if grazed by unseen teeth. One evening, she found a hidden panel behind a bookshelf. Inside was a leather-bound journal, its pages brittle. The writer, a man named Arthur Holmwood, described his visit to the castle a decade prior. He spoke of Dracula as a creature of the night, a vampire who fed on blood and thrived on fear. The final entry was scrawled in panic, "He is eternal." God help us. Clara's heart raced. She hid the journal, but the shadows seemed to writhe, and a low laugh echoed through the stacks. That night, her dreams grew vivid. A woman in white, her throat torn, beckoned from a misty void. Clara awoke to find her window open, the curtains billowing. On her pillow lay a lock of her own hair, tied with black ribbon. Fear gnawed at her, but curiosity drove her deeper. she began searching the texts for references to vampires, uncovering tales of a blood pact that bound Dracula to immortality. The castle's silence grew oppressive, broken only by distant cries that might have been wind or something worse. Back in Varnath, terror spread like plague. A young girl, Maria, vanished while gathering firewood. Her body was found at dawn, pale and bloodless, her eyes wide with horror. The villagers gathered in the church, their whispers turning to shouts. Father Dimitru, a grizzled priest, spoke of a vampiric curse, urging the men to arm themselves with stakes and holy water. Dracula has awakened, he warned, brandishing a silver cross. Clara, unaware of the village's plight, felt the castle's atmosphere darken. Dracula's visits grew more frequent, his gaze lingering on her throat. She noticed his shadow moved independently, slithering across walls like ink. One night, she followed a faint sobbing to a locked door in the east wing. Peering through the keyhole, she saw a stone crypt, its floor stained red. A figure writhed in chains, its face obscured. Before she could act, cold fingers grazed her shoulder. Dracula stood behind her, his breath icy. "Some doors are best left closed," he murmured. Clara fled to her room, barricading the door. Her revolver felt useless against the growing dread. She pored over Holmwood's journal, learning of Dracula's brides, women he had turned, bound to his will. The sobbing, she realized, was one of them, trapped in eternal torment. Escape was her only hope, but the castle's gates were locked, and the forest was a maze of wolves and fog. Clara's resolve hardened. She fashioned a stake from a broken chair and kept Holmwood's cross close. During the day, when Dracula was absent, she explored the castle, mapping its halls. In a forgotten chapel, she found vials of holy water, their glass etched with prayers. The air there felt lighter, as if resisting the castle's malevolence. That night, Dracula summoned her to dine. The table was set with rotting fruit and goblets of dark liquid. He spoke of immortality, his words seductive yet laced with menace. "You are special, Clara," he said, his fangs glinting. She clutched the cross under the table and he flinched, his face twisting into a snarl. Seizing the moment, she hurled holy water at him. He screamed, his skin sizzling, and vanished into a swarm of bats. Clara ran, the castle's halls twisting around her. She reached the crypt door, forcing it open. Inside, a bride, pale, with hollow eyes, lunged at her. Clara drove the stake into her chest, and the creature crumbled to dust, her scream fading into silence. But Dracula's laughter echoed, chilling her blood. "You cannot win," he taunted, his voice everywhere. Clara fled to the ramparts, the storm outside mirroring the chaos within. She knew she couldn't fight alone. She needed the village's help. Clara's escape from the castle was a blur of terror. She climbed down the outer walls, the wind tearing at her clothes. Wolves circled below, their eyes glowing like embers. She reached the forest, running until her lungs burned. Dawn broke as she stumbled into Varnath, collapsing at the church steps. Father Dimitru took her in, his face grim as she recounted her ordeal. The villagers, already reeling from Maria's death, rallied around her. They armed themselves with stakes, crosses, and torches, their fear outweighed by rage. Clara, clutching Holmwood's journal, revealed Dracula's nature and the blood pact. "We must destroy his heart," she urged, "or he'll never die." The march to the castle was a descent into hell. Wolves attacked, their jaws snapping. The villagers fought back, their crosses glowing faintly in the fog. At the gates, Dracula's shadow loomed, his laughter shaking the earth. "You come to die," he hissed, his form shifting, man beast missed. Clara led a small group to the crypt, while the others held the courtyard. The crypt was a slaughterhouse, its air thick with blood. Dracula's sarcophagus stood at the center, pulsing with unnatural life. The crypt was a maze of coffins, their lids scratched from within. Clara's group, Father Dimitru, a blacksmith named Stefan, and a widow, Ileana, moved cautiously, stakes ready. A low moan filled the air, and the brides emerged, their beauty warped by hunger. Stefan fell first, his throat torn open. Ileana drove a stake through one bride, but another pinned her, claws raking her chest. Clara reached the sarcophagus, its lid heavy with runes. Inside, Dracula lay, his eyes closed but alive. She raised her stake, but he awoke, his gaze paralyzing her. Father Dimitru chanted prayers, weakening Dracula's hold. Clara struck, the stake piercing his chest. He roared, blood black as tar spilling forth. But the heart was untouched, and he hurled her across the crypt, her cross skittering away. Ileana, bleeding but defiant, doused Dracula with holy water. He writhed, his form destabilizing. The surviving villagers dragged Clara out as the crypt trembled, stones falling. Outside, the battle raged, wolves and villagers clashing in a storm of fire and blood. Clara realized the blood pact required more. Dracula's heart had to be burned under a full moon, 2 nights away. The survivors retreated, their numbers dwindling, but hope flickered in Clara's heart. Clara's neck bore 2 faint marks from Dracula's near bite, and her strength waned. In Varnath, an old healer, Marta, confirmed her fear. The bite was turning her. "Kill Dracula before the full moon," Marta warned, "or you'll become his." Clara's dreams grew darker, filled with Dracula's voice, promising power and eternity. Her reflection faded, and her hunger sharpened. The villagers prepared for a final stand, fortifying the church with crosses and garlic. Clara studied Holmwood's journal, learning the ritual to destroy Dracula's heart. She felt his presence in her mind, taunting her resolve. Father Dimitru blessed her, his faith a shield against despair. The villagers, though terrified, trusted her, their courage born of loss. Dracula's attacks intensified. At dusk, he sent wolves to ravage Varnath, their howls drowning out screams. Clara fought alongside the villagers, her revolver useless, but her cross burning bright. The church held, but the cost was high. Half the defenders fell. As the full moon approached, Clara knew the battle would end where it began, in the castle's heart. On the night of the full moon, the church was a fortress of faith. Dracula arrived, not as a man, but a towering shadow, his claws rending wood and stone. The villagers fought with stakes and fire, their crosses glowing. Clara faced him on the altar, her bite pulsing in rhythm with his presence. "Join me," he whispered, his voice a lover's plea. She resisted, driving her cross into his chest. He staggered, the holy ground searing him. The villagers doused him with holy water, his screams shaking the rafters. He fled, a swarm of bats vanishing into the night. Clara led the survivors to the castle, their torches cutting through the fog. The crypt awaited, its air thick with malice. Dracula's brides, reborn, attacked, their nails like knives. Father Dimitru fell, his cross shattering as a bride tore out his heart. Clara reached the sarcophagus, her hands trembling. She poured holy water onto Dracula's exposed heart, its pulse sickening. With a torch, she set it ablaze. Dracula's scream was a tempest, his body crumbling to ash. The brides dissolved, their wails fading. The castle shook, as if mourning its master. Clara collapsed, the bite's poison fading as Dracula's curse lifted. The surviving villagers, Ileana and a few others, carried her from the crypt, the castle's walls cracking. Dawn broke, the fog lifting, revealing a sky of impossible blue. Varnath's church bells rang, a hymn of survival. Clara's strength returned, but her eyes held a shadow, a memory of the abyss. The villagers buried their dead, their grief tempered by victory. Clara burned Homewood's journal, its secrets too dangerous. She vowed to warn others, to ensure Dracula's name was never forgotten. The castle's ruins stood, a scar on the mountains, but no lights flickered there now, or so they hoped. Clara returned to Bucharest, a changed woman. She wrote her story, published as fiction to protect Varnath, but the truth lived in her nightmares. The villagers rebuilt, their church a beacon against the dark. Yet, in the Carpathians, whispers persisted. Travelers spoke of cold winds that carried a name, Dracula. Clara, now old, felt his presence in quiet moments, a chill that defied reason. The blood pact was broken, his heart ash, but evil, she knew, was patient. One night, a letter arrived, sealed with a dragon crest. It was blank, save for a single word, eternal. She burned it, her cross gleaming, but the shadows seemed to watch. Varnath's scars faded, but its people never forgot. Clara's tale, dismissed as fantasy, lingered in the minds of those who read it, a warning cloaked in story. The Carpathians stood sentinel, their peaks hiding secrets older than time. Clara died quietly, her cross in hand, but her legacy endured, a call to vigilance against the dark. The castle's ruins drew the curious, though few returned. Strange lights danced there, and the fog whispered names. Dracula was gone, his heart destroyed, yet the mountains held their breath. Evil, unbound by flesh, waited for a new vessel, a new night. Varnath's bells rang on, defiant, but the shadow of Dracula was eternal, a reminder that some horrors never truly die.